dear friends and colleagues. Distance interpreting and the globalization have created a very peculiar situation for us interpreters that work now in this new modality uh, during the COVID times. There are a lot of colleagues, mostly new colleagues, newcomers to the profession, who are working now asking for very low fees compared to what usually interpreters at work events charge. This is mostly because of two reasons. Number one, some interpreters are very afraid of getting no work and they're going through really tough economic times. That's something we are all experiencing right now, but some people are really panicking. The second reason is that we have a lot of interpreters, most of them new, a lot of them good interpreters, I must admit, who are working at a distance from emerging economies. Emerging economies where you have a cost of living that is much lower than the cost of living in more developed nations. And the problem is that they are willing to work for a considerably low fee compared to the fees that usually are charged for the same service by interpreters that live in industrialized nations. The problem that we have is that distance interpreting does not obey any rules. It doesn't observe any kind of professional domicile policy. In other words, it doesn't matter where you live, you can be hired and you can work an event anywhere in the world. So, if I am an agency and I am looking to make the most profit I can possibly make, and I know that there are some interpreters now in some less developed economies who are willing to charge 20% of what my regular interpreters in the developed economies charge, I will try to go with them and get them to work Monday through Friday for the same amount of money that my original interpreters were going to work me only Monday. This might be very exciting to the new interpreters. In some cases, interpreters in countries where they had never really been exposed to big high-profile events, as big and high-profile as it gets during these pandemic times. To them, to be paid 20% of what the interpreters in Western Europe and the United States make, it's still more money than what they usually make in their own local markets. So they are more than willing to work for that amount of money, and they are very happy doing that. At the same time, they are providing for their families, and they feel that in especially their countries that are suffering economically because of the pandemic, they can make ends meet. They are not just working for less money, they are also working under less demanding conditions, I would say under poor working conditions. For example, they are agreeing to work for longer periods of time. They are working solo without having any passive interpreter to help them and without switching interpreters after some 20-30 minutes of work. They are willing to work for monies that sometimes are paid by the minute or by the hour instead of by the day. And also they are willing to accept cancellations without any payment for the canceled event. These are very advantageous conditions for the agencies and its shareholders, but they are not good for the market and they are really bad for the profession by any standard you want to apply. These interpreters that are right now under this mirage, really fascinated with what they are accomplishing, are not realizing that by lowering the fees, they are hurting the market, but especially they are hurting themselves. If an interpreter is willing to work for 20% less than what most interpreters make, even for 10% less than what most interpreters make, or for 80% less than what interpreters make regularly for the same type of service, as is the case in some situations, those interpreters will never ever be able to charge more. Let me explain. Regardless of where the interpreter lives, eventually everybody knows, because the word gets around, that there's an interpreter especially if we're talking about a good interpreter willing to work for less money. So if that interpreter later on realizes that he or she can command a higher fee because he or she is working really good and because they now have a very well-known name, a better reputation, they run into the problem that they will not be able to charge more. Why not? Because by now everybody, all agencies, all platforms, all direct clients know how much they charge. And for that reason, the argument will always be the same. How come you want to charge me that amount of money if you just work for such and such other client and you charge them half of that, or 20% of that, or 80% of that? Are they better than I am? I am offering you better conditions, or I had a client interpreter relationship with you for a longer period of time. These interpreters soon come to understand that once that you lower your fees, it's next to impossible to bring them up to where they were, much less to try to increase them. So what they are doing by accepting these standards right now is they are damning themselves to continue to work for the same amount of money and under the same labor conditions for the rest of their careers. Sure, they might have a lot of work forever, but they will never be able to have a good standard of living. And that's not the only problem. The only problem is also that as the agencies and the platforms and the direct clients find out how much they're charging, word gets around to the other interpreters because word of mouth from interpreter to interpreter is very effective, and because the agencies will tell the interpreter, you charge too much, we are going with somebody else. And then they see the other interpreter is working the event, and it's not very difficult to figure out how much they are paying the other person. If you ever accept to do that, and right now you are happy doing that, you gotta understand that in the future you will never get to work with the interpreters that you are taking the market away from, because these interpreters will know that you are the person willing to work for little money, that is willing to work under very, very bad conditions, and they don't want to be a part of that. They will not want to be associated to your reputation. They will not bring you into their market. They will not share the booth with you. So those interpreters that are willing to work for very little money and under terrible conditions will never get out of it again. And it's understandable that in their country the cost of living is lower, but they gotta understand that the interpreter that lives in a developed nation cannot compete with those fees, because those fees will not allow that interpreter to even pay their bills or put food on their children's table. So that's a no-no. That's non-negotiable for the interpreter. And that takes me to the main point. A good interpreter is not just that it does a good job in the booth or distance interpreting or in any stressful situation. A good interpreter, unless you are an employee, also has to be a good business person, a good negotiator. When you go into a room prepared to negotiate with an agency, a platform, or a direct client, you have to walk into that room willing to walk out of that room after the negotiation without the contract, without the assignment, without the client. You always need to be prepared to say no. You go into a negotiation with a set of values, working conditions, and payment in your mind that you will not be willing to go below that. You will not lower your work conditions, you will not lower your fee past that amount, and that's it. You have to go in there with an attitude that you're flexible and you want to negotiate, but it's better to negotiate with other things. Work out a payment plan instead of lowering your fee, for example. If you walk out of a room after negotiating hard with a person in good faith, and you walk away with a no without an assignment, then you won that negotiation. The worst that you can do is to walk into a negotiation with the attitude that I will get this assignment no matter what. Because when you do that, you're walking in with the idea that you are willing to do anything to get the job. Lower your fees, lower your standards, accept anything that they will propose in order to get the contract. At that point, you already lost. And you didn't lose just with that client. You lost for your professional future, and you have damaged and harmed the profession. You're hurting the market, you're hurting the profession, you're hurting the reputation of interpreters. You are not acting like a professional, and you must act like a professional on the international stage if you're willing to work in an international market. At least that is my opinion. Thank you very much.